What's happening, people? Back with another reaction, back with some more Bad Religion, and we're going to listen to some more live Bad Religion. We're going back to their 1997 album Tested, which is taken in part from a live tour of Germany in 1996. The other tunes are studio recorded tracks, but which were not included on any of the previous albums. So I mentioned it before, my favorite one of their albums is Suffer No Control Against the Grain. I like their entire catalog, but that 3-album run is just perfection. There's just not a bad tune in the bunch. And I think I mentioned before, the next two albums, Generator and Recipe for Hate, are really, really good. I would just maybe put them a quarter step below the three previous. But the title track for Recipe for Hate is one of my favorite tracks, and I put it on the same level as the very best tunes from Suffer No Control and Against the Grain. So we're going to listen to a live performance of one of my very favorite Bad Religion tunes. I do think I talked about the lyrics to a considerable extent in the reaction to the studio version, so I'll be a bit more concise here, but it's a song about, I think you can extrapolate it, and I think it is on one level about humankind and the way that we're disposed to do things in sort of, the modern recorded history era. But I do think it is also narrower and more specific, and that is about the way in which youth in the US are brought up to sort of buy into this American dream, both economically and politically and militarily, and this idea that, if you just work really hard, and buy into the system, buy into the American project, be totally fine with however the U.S. decides to sort of achieve its economic prosperity, whatever it decides to do militarily. If you buy into all that, then you'll have a happy life, you'll get to have a 2-bedroom house, you'll have a white picket fence, and it'll all be great. And Greg and the band are saying, this is a recipe for hate. Ultimately, you're going to have kids growing up to sort of, feel differently and very negatively about people because they were born on the other side of a political line. So it's sort of, you can hear the sort of goose steps of jingoism and sort of xenophobia. And also, if the idea is that we're all sort of growing up to sort of pursue our personal economic prosperity, eventually, there's going to be sort of fighting over who gets what and how much they get. And even if that is inevitable in some respect, it's ultimately going to lead to this idea where people are going to have a false promise in their head that, like, well, if I just work hard, I'm going to get what I deserve and I'll get like a fair share. But ultimately, wait, like they're saying that they're not going to raise minimum wage, and wait, now I'm like, I don't get a pension, and wait, now we're saying that like you're going to cut taxes for the very highest people, but they're going to start paying people more, so that economic prosperity will filter down to me, will trickle down to me. And perhaps over time this will lead to like socioeconomic resentment, like interclass resentment. So again, the band is basically saying that the American dream, at least the way it's inculcated in young people's minds, is a recipe for hate. And again, I think it's also sort of saying this on a broader respect, that, in other places people are brought up to sort of buy into whatever the national project is and told that if you just do it the way that we're saying is good and right, then everything will be fine. And this is, again, a recipe for jingoism and nationalism and hate. So let's get it. This is Bad Religion, a live performance of Recipe for Hate from their 1997 album Tested, which is taken from a live performance in Germany in 1996. Everywhere. Compelling too. You make me this compelling too. We can hear like crazy. Wearing just such a policy that's best for all humanity. The style of culture, the sort of progress, the vector of suffering, a war that's not the breeze. The combination, the duty and vocation, the blood of the hybrid, it's just a recipe. This next verse. Just one word left. Oh, so you know what's coming next. Fuck Armageddon, This Is Hell. From How Could Hell Be Any Worse, their first studio album. Yeah, it's interesting, right? Because this, I was talking before when I reacted to a couple tracks on this that were from the very earliest days, from How Could Hell Be Any Worse, like a Yesterday, or wait, that may be from the Back to the Known EP, but basically stuff from the very early 80s, and this is from the like mid to second half of the 90s. So I was saying that, okay, you know, they're playing this 10 years or more after they wrote it, and Greg's voice is different, but this one comes from 93, so it's not like too far before this, only 3 years. But it's still, you know, it has a slightly different sound than the studio recording, and I love the sort of the oomph, like the percussion, the drums hit a little bit harder on this live recording than in some of their studio albums, and again, they sound really good live, you know, it's one of those things where, like, you know, you can really love a band's albums, and then you hear a live performance, it's like, it's cool, but, you know, maybe don't sound quite as, like, perfectly in sync, but I think they sounded good, and ultimately the oohs and ahs, they came out at the end, so again, it's one of my very favorite Bad Religion tunes. Do let me know what you think of this live performance. I will see you next time. Peace.